Welcome everyone. I am MagMongoSlade. This is our December 2025 Q&A. I know that it's not live, which is what you all prefer, but StreamYard was getting a little hefty on my wallet and I need some time to recover. So it just had to go. It had to go. I canceled that. I canceled Peacock. I cancel quite a few things. The only thing I do pay for actually now is Instacart. And I get Peacock through Instacart. And then now that WWE is going to be moving all of their library off Peacock, there's no need for me to have it anymore anyway. So that's going to be that. I need some time to make some money. I know a lot of people were joking that I was independently wealthy. Well, that medical bills, that it does that to you. You know, it wasn't mine. Again, my girlfriend she has cancer. She's still fighting with it right now. Thank you for all your blessings and the people who donated. I appreciate it. But we're still going through it, and she's slowly improving. It's a seesaw. You can never get too comfortable. So she's doing okay. But we're going to get into this thing. We're going to get into this Q&A. We're going to start with 305 Johnny. He has 4 questions. 1. Are there any Detroit native influencers you followed or recommend? The answer to this question is no. Mainly because I only know one influencer that is from Detroit. Other than, I don't think I count as an influencer. But Anton Daniels is from Detroit. And I think I heard him mention it before. And that's the only way that I know. I think Teach 'em Chuck, he's also from Detroit. So I would definitely suggest you following Teach 'em Chuck. Especially if you like more of my political videos. And some of that stuff. Teach 'em Chuck is tremendous. He works a lot with Chad Jackson, who does the MLK Project. And the two of them, they do a lot. They used to do podcasts together. And all that kind of stuff. But Teach 'em Chuck is a fucking genius. I love that guy. He's from the city. So those two. Teach 'em Chuck and Anton Daniels. 2. What was your favorite Fox Kids cartoon in the late 90s, early 2000s? Well, the interesting thing about that is I was 16 in 2000. So I was not watching Fox Kids cartoons. I haven't went back and watched anything other than Static Shock either. And when it comes to Static Shock, I probably like the first 2 seasons. But the longer it went, the less interested I was in it. And then by the time it got to the Little Romeo Open, I was pushing through it, barely making through it. 3rd question. Did you get to watch the first Digimon movie or Pokemon movie? I believe I did watch the Pokemon movie, but I don't remember it. I wasn't really a Digimon guy, even though I did like the Digimon games. I played the Digimon games, but I was more of a Pokemon guy. And I watched the anime rather. I couldn't really tell you that much about it, but maybe I'll get back into Pokemon. Not into the cards and everything, but maybe watch the anime. Because I know Pokemon went on for a really long time. But, no, I don't remember Pokemon or Digimon. 4, have you ever thought of doing a documentary on Detroit? I considered it. You know, when I walk around the city, I do consider it. When I was working in the Job Corps, not Job Corps, I'm sorry. What was it called? The AmeriCorps program. I was going from neighborhood to neighborhood. We was doing cleanups. We was talking to residents. And I was like, man, it probably does need to be a serious documentary done on what happened to this city. And looking into the mayors and how many people from city council have been indicted, by the FBI, and the amount of socialism and what they did to the big 3. But it's a large scope situation because it's hard to blame it on one thing. It's like, it's not just that black people run the city. It's not just that socialists have been running the city, for decades or whatever. It's a combination of things because it's a combination of the steel industry, the automotive industry, national policy on uh, uh, cars and things like this, like these Green New Deals and all these people. All this stuff is affecting Detroit. I think you have to pick like a timeline. And I think that most of the books written about the bankruptcy were not really fair, because in college I looked into the bankruptcy and I saw that the biggest creditors were unions. And I was very quickly told not to talk that much about that, which is why I really struggled when it came to graduating. It's because that's when I really became like a libertarian. And I was questioning the amount of government influence on cities. You know, these public-private partnerships. I didn't see the purpose in a public-private partnership. I would just say let the private industries handle it. And I would get points taken off. No, citizens like public-private partnerships. I'm like, what do you mean citizens like it? You're asking me to solve this puzzle. I'm trying to solve the puzzle, you know? So that was a real weird time, even though it was after the bankruptcy. But we were forced to read books about the bankruptcy and all that kind of stuff. There needs to be a serious documentary done about it, though, because Detroit has a really fantastic history. You know, we used to have huge black middle class areas. All that stuff's gone. You know, Paradise Valley, what they used to call the Black Bottom. That's where our first black mayor came from, Coleman Young. He was born in those areas. You know, of course, we were Motown. You had so many wonderful musical acts come from this city. And now you don't have anything. You don't even have no musicians, no mainstream musicians anyway, come from Detroit. And some of our biggest celebrities are people who weren't born here, like Aaliyah. She lived in Detroit for a long time. She's not from here. She's from like New York. Joe Louis, he's not from here. You know, like they lived here. Rosa Parks, another one. She wasn't born in Detroit. So there was, you know, a whole lot of stuff we could talk about when it comes to doing a documentary on Detroit, and it would be interesting. I think there should be like a series on what happened to specific Black American cities, similar to, you know, what they did with I don't want to say like the Uncle Tom documentaries, but along those lines, where people from the city actually look at the laws written, the individuals who ran for office, who their connections were with, the policies that they took on, and what the outcome of those policies were. It sounds a lot more drab, but I think it's a good way to explain what happened to Detroit, Washington, D.C., Baltimore, Oakland, New Orleans, Cleveland, Philadelphia, all these places that used to be pretty solidly middle class, middle to, you know, working class. And a lot of it is the same stuff, you know, because when you read books on it, it overlaps quite a bit. You know, like what happened to urban areas in general. They try to act like it's just one thing. But that's part of it, you know. NAFTA is one thing that hurt Philadelphia, Detroit, and, you know, a bunch of other cities too in the middle of the country. But a lot of the decline was happening before NAFTA came in, especially in Detroit. You know, you have to talk about people selling drugs in the Ford plants, and they're still doing that today, to my knowledge. I rambled on that one. Sorry. Let's move on. DeAndre Dukes, he has 4 questions. 1, is 2025 the worst year for wrestling? I don't think it's the worst year. It's hard to say what the worst year is, if we being honest, bro. Because a lot of the years that I lived through have been very, very forgettable. You know, 2013 to 2017 is kind of a blur, you know? It's hard to remember what was going on at any point in time during those years. But I think the year I didn't enjoy wrestling the most was probably, obviously, the pandemic. I was still having a lot of fun with the cinematic matches and some of the silly stuff that they were doing to try to keep people to watch the show. But that was obviously the worst year, objectively, because there was no crowd. So for like a year and a half there, It wasn't very good because there was no crowd. So it's hard to compare anything to the era where there was no crowd. 2, once John Cena retires, what's the landscape going to look like? Well, I think John Cena has prepared us pretty well for his retirement. He's been in and out since like 2018 and 2019. I think once Cena is gone, you have to replace that position. I think they want Cody for that position. I think that's why he wrestled Cody multiple times this year. The point of which was to put Cody in position, which is also why I think if that's what they wanted to do, then Cody should have been his final opponent. And Cody should have been who he passed the torch to. I thought that was the goal when they wrestled at WrestleMania and Cena won the title. I thought, okay, he's going to hold the belt until his final match. He's going to drop the belt to Cody. All is going to be right with the world. And then it ended up being far worse than I could have imagined. But yeah, I think it just means they moved Cody into the superhero position. And a lot of people who are already mad about that, I don't think that's going to change, brother. I just don't see it. I don't see it changing for you. 3, what do you want from TNA now that they're on AMC? Number one thing I want from TNA is I want a better roster. I want them to go out and actually recruit young talent that hasn't been seen all on television that much. I want them to bring those people in, and I want them to actually start showcasing young talent. It's crazy that one of the youngest rosters in mainstream wrestling right now is in the NWA. There are almost no graybeards in the NWA. There's a couple of fat old guys in the tag team division, but near the top of the card, there's almost no old people. There's almost no old women on the roster. You know, they give opportunities mostly to young people and people who've been there for a while. So it's like there's been people who have been in the NWA a year or two, maybe longer, and they're starting to move up and get more opportunities. And you don't see these people everywhere. They work NWA territories, but they don't pop up on GCW. They don't pop up on MLW. They don't pop up on anywhere else. So it actually gives you an interest in watching their specific product so that you can see the progress of those specific people. So I would like to see TNA take that model where they go out and even if they have to get people who've only had 15 matches total their entire career and bring some of those people in, you know, train them up, get them some rotations, and maybe bring in some people from Europe or whatever you need to do. But I need fresh faces. That's what we need. Because TNA has the oldest roster. And I think it's older than WWE and AEW. In terms of people who are in top spots who have gray in their beards. You know, like it's a lot of old guys in TNA. And it's not just a lot of old guys. There's a lot of old guys that nobody really likes. You know. But you have to be smart, I think. And there's obviously more competition than there used to be in terms of Ring of Honor throwing around money to bring guys in Collision. But now that you're on television, there's got to be some very low card guys in AEW and WWE that are willing to take the chance to come and work for TNA. You know, it would be nice if you could get some of those people. That's number one thing they need to do. Number 2, of course, is to create better creative. I'm not sure how they do that, but maybe getting rid of Tommy Dreamer would help. But number 1 is talent. Please bring in better talent, especially for your women's division, your tag team division. It can't just be the Hardy Boys and then this revolving door of guys who don't come to stay very long. You need to actually be able to build a division. And I think NXT has helped them quite a bit because NXT has provided a lot of the youth that is on the TNA's roster. But they need to start doing it themselves. They need to go out and start finding their own talent. That's a number 1. DeAndre Duke's 4th question. What guys and girls do you want at the top to carry WWE all the way until 2030? Well, I think we see a lot of them in NXT right now. Oba, Javon, Kendall. I think Jada. She could be tremendous. I think you got obviously Braun Breaker. You can't talk about this stuff without Braun Breaker and Dominic Mysterio. Those are like the top 5 to 10 right there. There might be some Mexican guys that might pop up eventually that WWE wants to bring in and try to do something with. But I think the top 5 to 10 are already floating around. Again, 2030 is closer than we think. It's almost 4 years away. And most of these people will still be in their early 30s at that time. They'd be like 32, 33 years old. I know Kylie Armstrong, who is another one of the people I like, she's already 31, and Trick Williams is already 32 or something like that. So they'd be in their mid-30s at the time. But that's still pretty young considering guys are wrestling into their late 40s. And then there's no house shows. So unless they get like a serious injury, you can still go at 44, 45 years old. So I definitely look at a lot of the talent and say some of these people could still be around. And then there's obviously the surprises. There could be somebody I'm not thinking of who could end up being tremendous for them. All right. Black Saiyan 97. He has 5 questions. 1. Why do you hate Big Show so much? Well, what is there to like about somebody with no talent? That's what I'm trying to figure out. Like, the guy got his job because he's big. Now, he wasn't big and athletic. He was just big. It just so happened that to a degree, he does have some level of athleticism. Well, he did when they brought him in. By 1999, however, he had been in the business, 4 years? He was not showing any level of athleticism, and he was fat. And I have been suffering watching Big Show since 99. When they made him world champion in WWE, I could not believe it. I could not. Like, literally to this day, I do not go back and watch anything that got anything to do with Big Show being world champion. I don't appreciate it. I don't appreciate when he was the ECW champion. When you saw how people treated him and Dave Bautista on the ECW show, that's how I feel every time somebody brings up Big Show to me. I want to throw dirty diapers at Big Show. I can't stand the man. There's never been somebody so big and such a waste of time and talent. And he's just big. That's the only thing he's got going for him is that he's big. That's not enough, man. 2, what are your thoughts on the Wu-Tang Clan, and who's your favorite member in the group, and who's the most underrated? Well, obviously the Wu-Tang Clan is one of the greatest rap groups of all time. I got them in my top 5. Sometimes I got them closer to number 1. Sometimes I got it closer to number 4. But I love Wu-Tang Clan. My favorite member, obviously, is the Ghostface Killah. I think he makes the best albums. I do think that Method Man is an easier rapper to understand, but I don't think his albums can even touch Ghostface and Raekwon's albums. So, I love Method Man, but I think Method Man is the kind of rapper that he's very chill. So, I hate to put it like this, but there's almost an element like it might be too easy for him, because when you listen to his albums, you don't hear that he put a whole lot of effort into it. But I love Method Man. But my favorite is obviously Ghostface Killah. And the Iron Man album, Supreme Clientele, Fish Scale. These are tremendous records. Obviously, Raekwon probably has the best discography, for only built for Cuban Links 1 and 2. And there are some other ones too. Matter of fact, I was right the first time. Ghostface has the best discography of the group. The most underrated member of the team, that's interesting, because most of them are just kind of like high level rappers, but I don't really necessarily like what they do. Like, I don't really like Inspector Deck or Jizza. I'm not gonna sit down and listen to them. As part of the group, I could stand, You God and all of them, but like individually, I don't see any use for them really. So it's hard for me to say who is the most underappreciated. RZA gets a whole lot of credit, so he's not like the most underappreciated. I guess these sort of ghost producers of Wu-Tang, which would be True Master and Mathematics, I think they don't get enough credit. I, I think that maybe you might have RZA taking a whole lot of credit for what they do. But I think those are probably the most. They're not official members of the group, but they are very important in the craft and that sound that you hear when it comes to Wu-Tang. 3. How long before you think WWE eventually buys TNA? I don't think WWE wants to buy TNA. I think if they wanted to buy TNA, they would have done it. I think if they wanted to buy TNA's library, they would buy it. And that would be a great cash infusion to the organization. But if the AMC deal doesn't work out, then they probably will have to buy TNA. I think if somebody else wants to buy TNA, they'll have to go through WWE to do it. I do truly believe that. I don't know if WWE wants to buy TNA, but I don't think they want anybody else to buy TNA without them getting their hands on it first. So if somebody's going to buy TNA, I think WWE would probably say, we'll step in and buy it before they let somebody else outside of that relationship buy it. But I don't think WWE wants to buy TNA. Otherwise, what's stopping them? You know? Why would they increase TNA's value and then buy it? I don't know why they would do that. Why not just buy it while it was down in the dumps? 4. Did you ever believe that conspiracy that Tupac was alive and was living in Africa? First, I thought it was Cuba. Now, when I was a kid, I was 12 years old when Tupac died. I probably heard that Tupac was still alive most of my teenage years. That a lot of people thought that he was still alive. I didn't see how he could fake his own death. And I didn't see why he would do that to his own mom. You know, it didn't make sense to me at that time that he would fake his death. And to what end? You know, and then for his mom to still be on TV mourning him, I just didn't think that he was still alive. You know, that was just on a intellectual level. I just didn't think he would do that to his mom. So no, I never really believed it, but I heard it a lot. And then when there kept being new Tupac albums, that's actually when I started. Was like, wait a second, this is before I knew that artists made 1,000 songs and then the labels picked 10 or 15 or whatever for the album. So when I was really young, I was like, how does Tupac have so many unreleased out songs? Like, he must be, keep making new songs. But once I realized, and I think I forgot who like, I think maybe reading like The Source or Double XL or something like that, I heard about unreleased tracks. And I think Nas, when he did the when the thing happened with Nas and he had the double album, which was supposed to be I Am. This was in 99, 98. And it was supposed to be a double album. And then it leaked. And that became the Lost Tapes. And then he had to re-record, different things for the double album. And it ended up being I Am and Nostradamus, which came back to back. And that's when I was like, oh, so guys record like songs in bulk. And that's how it makes sense that Tupac has so many records that nobody has ever heard of. That's how it made sense to me. And that's like, all right, them niggas dead. But I knew he was dead already. But I couldn't figure out how they kept releasing new stuff. And it took me a while. I was like 14 when I figured it out. 5. Would you say Denzel Washington is the greatest black actor of all time? No, I would say Denzel Washington is the greatest actor of all time. I really love Denzel Washington. Him being black is not even in conversation. I think he's in the same tier with Al Pacino and Robert De Niro. And I think DiCaprio is up there with them too. DiCaprio's been doing this stuff since he was a teenager. So he might be the GOAT. I don't really like any teenage DiCaprio movies, but he might be the GOAT when it comes to how long he's been doing this stuff. But Denzel Washington, he's been doing this thing since, I think, before I was born. So yeah, he's absolutely the best black actor of all time. Him and Samuel L. Jackson are probably neck and neck when it comes to that. Oh, what name is this? Arcadia Jaha. They have 5 questions. Welcome. I've never seen this name before, so welcome, Arcadia Jaha. Hello, Mongo. Always love your content and look forward to your videos and unique insights into a variety of topics beyond pro wrestling. Keep it coming. Have a few questions. 1. Rank these rappers: Mace, AZ, Inspector Deck. Rank them? Ooh. AZ number 1. Now, Mace is great. All right. I know a lot of people, they sleep on Mace because Mace made one dope album and then disappeared because his other albums were kind of half-assed. So AZ, by definition, is number 1. You can listen to pretty much any AZ album, especially the 2000s albums like The Format or AWOL. Tremendous. But they have nothing on Do or Die and some of the other stuff that he's done. But AZ is a top-level MC. He's just tremendous. Inspector Deck, I think I just mentioned this earlier. I'm not a huge fan, you know. I just know one Inspector Deck verse, and it's the one everybody knows. You know, that's the one everybody knows. But I didn't sit down and listen to Inspector Deck or break him down like that. But AZ was one of my favorite guys to listen to and just chill. So AZ, absolutely. But Mace is nothing to sleep on. You know, I think the production and the presentation of Mace led people to believe that Mace is kind of whack or whatever. But no, Mace is very good. 5. Your top 5 hip-hop producers. Oh. Well, this is a tough question. I'm gonna go Ninth Wonder. I'm gonna go Dilla, obviously. Probably take those two and reverse them as being 1 and 2. DJ Quick, Alchemist. We'll say High Tech, but High Tech is in the same category with Dilla and Q-Tip. Q-Tip is another one. That's 5 right there, but I feel like they all kind of similar. You know, Kanye is another one. That's 6. Maybe Kanye over Quick. Yeah, maybe Kanye over Quick. Then you have the Heatmakers, who really did a really great job of crafting the Diplomat sound. Justice League did a really good job when it came to helping to create the sound of Rick Ross. Then you got, Drummer Boy, who did a really great job too. DJ Toomph, who of course crafted a lot of the tip sound. T.I. Just Blaze. It's hard to get down to 5. If I have to take 5, like 5 for show, and I can't go beyond 5, I would say number 1, Dilla. Number 2, Ninth Wonder. Number 3, Kanye West. Number 4, probably RZA. And number 5, I want to say Pimp C. I want to say Organized Noise. It's hard to pick one because like a lot of it is very East Coast based. Dilla's from Detroit. I gotta go with Dilla number 1, and then I'm also West Coast producers. Dre is not really don't get me started with Dre and Daz and all these guys, man. But for sure, Dilla, Ninth Wonder, Kanye. Got to go with RZA on there. In terms of just the volume of stuff that he produced for the Wu-Tang Clan, just sheer volume. Obviously, over time, he got credit for stuff that he didn't do, but just the sheer volume at the beginning, RZA was just ridiculous. But it's tough to pick a 5. It's tough to pick 5 because Manny Fresh is on there too. And Beats by the Pound is also, it's like, because I've never really been like regional, biased, even though I kind of am New York biased. But if you'd asked me this question probably about 10 or 15 years ago, Swiss Beats would probably been on there. But looking at it now, like, nah. But I think 5, a solid 5 would probably be Alchemist. I think Alchemist is probably at the top 5. Harry Fraud is up there too, but I'm just, as I sit here and think about it, just more people are coming to mind. So I'm just gonna stop at Alchemist. All right, just gonna stop right there. 5. His third question: top 5 NXT female baddies. Oh boy, this one's tough too because obviously number 1 is Jada Parker, without question. We should be throwing rose petals when she comes out. You know, we should be simping hard for Jada Parker. So she's number 1. Nikita Lyons is kind of cringe, but I think she's on the list too. I don't know if she'll be number 2, but she's on the list. Lola Vice is on the list for sure. Yeah, Lola Vice is certainly on the list. She's on that list. So that's what, 3. What else? Who else we got? Let's see. Kalani Jordan's on there. She's cute. She doesn't have the body, but she's got a nice face card. Very athletic and flexible. So she's on there. And then we need one more. I think that's 4. We need one more. Who would make a good 5? I'm thinking of somebody from Evolve, but I can't put my name. I tried hard, man. There's got to be somebody else I'm not thinking of. Because when I think of NXT baddies, there's like 3 names that pop, like Lola Vice, Jada Parker, and Nikita Lyons. The first 3 that come up. So I've already said them. So maybe Chantel Moore. She's featured a lot in Evolve. But then you also have Mason Diggs. I think that's her name is. Is it Mason Diggs? Mason Holiday, I think her name is. She's a cutie too. So maybe those. 4. Are you surprised? His 4th question. Are you surprised there is not a stronger pushback from the fan base with the continued push of superstars that have been popular for a decade? E.g., Rollins, Roman, Punk, Alexa, AJ Lee, Charlotte, etc. I think part of it being that Triple H took over, that people are kind of okay with it. I think if Vince was still in control, there would be more complaints. But I think when Triple H gets to show his version of these characters, that people are giving him the space to do that. And I think it's really unfair because I started complaining about how old the roster got. But you see it a lot on the internet. There's more people complaining about it. And I typically look at things and say, I get it, but I think a lot of it is they let Triple H cook. They're letting Triple H do his version of Roman Reigns and what he thinks CM Punk should do and what he thinks Rollins should do. But in all honesty, most of these people should be, part-timers and out of the way, if we're being honest. All right. His 5th question. Which female NXT superstar do you feel will have the most upside in 5 years? Sol Ruka, Kalani Jordan, Lola Vice, or Jada Parker? I truly believe that the most staying power is with Jada Parker because she has personality. And I think she works as a babyface and as a heel. I think Sol Ruka I have definitely a fear that Sol Ruka is going to get hurt or something's going to happen and she's not going to be able to do the Soul Snatcher. And that's the move that's over and not necessarily her because we never see Soul do any long promos or anything like that. And that's the weak point for the others, for Kalani, Lola, and Soul. Personality and presentation has been a problem, but it's not a problem at all for Jada Parker. You could bring her on TV next week and she'll be just fine and she'll fit in because personality is there. In-ring is not there, but personality is there. In-ring is something she's going to have to work on for sure. All right. Next is Mr. VXG, an OG on the channel. He has a TNA question. I think it's a series of TNA questions. How would you run the new TNA? Who would your main champions be? Which unused WWE or free agent vets would you try to poach? Who would you release? Well, I said what I would do. I would come in, I would give a big boost of pay to Kazarian and Brian Myers and Moose and Eric Young. I would give all of those guys probably a $5,000 to $10,000 raise, depending on how much money they're going to make. And then 6 months in, I'll start releasing them one at a time. And the reason why you do that is because they're too old and they don't bring any value to the company. You give them something for their loyalty, and then you send them on their way. Like, get out of here. And then you start looking at some of these indies who have young talent, and you start bringing some of those people in. One of the things you look at as people who have maxed out other places and they're just kind of spinning their wheels. So I would go to NWA, get the Page sisters, and Ella Envy. They've been in NWA for a while. They've done everything that they're going to do. They're not going to be there forever. Somebody like a Hollywood Haley J, you bring her in because she's different. She might be a bit of a knucklehead, but it's TNA. You got Tessa Blanchard on your roster, right? I would consider bringing her in. I would bring in somebody like Calvin Tankman. I don't see why he doesn't have a job anywhere. It's not sensible that they wouldn't bring him in. I would consider bringing in somebody that's a stalwart, just a mid-carder who might be able to work main events sometimes, like Baron Corbin. I forget what his name is on the indies. I would really consider, if WWE wanted to do release some talent, if we can get a guy like Apollo Crews, you would do something with him. You could bring him in. But I would mostly be looking younger, like for talent that are underneath and not appreciated. I would definitely look at House of Glory, some of the people that they feature on their shows. Looking at the Ring of Honor roster, and you look for guys that are underutilized, like Private Party and Top Flight. You bring those guys in. You need a new tag team division, right? So you bring those guys in. You just consider that there's people who are probably being paid well, but they're not doing much of anything, and you consider bringing them in if you can. Who knows? They might be able to just walk out the door. They probably won't be able to walk out, but I would consider, getting guys who are young, but they've been on TV and they've achieved a little something. But you need a mixture of people that can work right now, and then you need projects. And I think I've given that. You got some projects there, like the Page sisters and Ella Envy. You got some people that you can bring in right now and do stuff like Private Party and Top Flight. You got people that are underutilized that you could use at the top, like Tankman, like Baron Corbin. Even though you probably wouldn't want to keep a guy like Baron Corbin around very long, but he's a familiar face for people who watched wrestling during the WWE years. You want to bring a guy like him in. I mean, MLW keeps their talent pretty locked up, so there's nobody there that I would really take. But I would consider some of the European talents. Consider people who've been canceled, because if you can get away with bringing in Tessa, then maybe you might be able to bring in Low Key too. Like if you can get away with Tessa, why not Low Key? Why not Austin Aries? But Austin Aries works for MLW, so no. But I'm not talking about Marty Scurll though. I'm not talking about scrubbing the bottom of the basement floor for bums. But that's what I would consider really. Dr. Doom, welcome to the show. Welcome to the stage. He has a couple of questions here. He says, can you do a retrospective on John Cena's wrestling career and legacy? I still think for as much respect as he has and has earned, it's baffling that some don't realize how important he was to WWE's business and image. The latter part that you mentioned there is the most important thing, is that John Cena, for a generation, 2 generations, was their Hulk Hogan. And all the John Cena scandals has been within the last 2 or 3 years. The stuff with China and him being naked on like the Oscars or something like that. Like all that stuff is pretty recent. And there's going to be some stuff about him, the David Otunga stuff, where he was verbally abusive to Tyler Rex or whatever. Nobody cares about that shit. But like a guy who never did anything that would purposefully piss off a bunch of people or humiliate the company in any way, he was a perfect robot. You know, like sometimes Cena is on like Joe Rogan or something like that, and he gives a lot, and you learn a lot from him. And then he does Chris Van Vliet or something like that, where he basically says nothing for 2 hours. So you can really support that. But I think Cena is a great reflection of what pro wrestling was from 2009 to 2019, for sure. You know, he was a stalwart. He was very important to the image and business. Like, he was a huge draw. So, and without question, a huge draw. But I think his image really helped the company as much as selling tickets did. Next, he says, if you could book the John Cena retirement tour, how would you have done it? I'm sure anything would have been better than what Triple H has done. I hope fans never let off the hook for this. I think it would have been a lot simpler if Cena would have won the Royal Rumble, went on, wrestled a heel at WrestleMania, beat that heel for the title, won the belt, and then wrestled heel Randy Orton, heel CM Punk, heel AJ Styles. You know, then he started giving them a couple of new heels like Logan Paul and Dominic Mysterio, and a couple of other guys for him to work with on his way out. And then you have his final match against Brock Lesnar, and he loses to Brock Lesnar. And maybe Brock Lesnar wins the belt. Maybe you have Cena drop the belt before his final match, or whatever the case may be. And you have Brock beat Cena, and that's it. You call it a day. I probably would have done Goldberg and Cena too, because Goldberg's career was ending, and I think having Goldberg versus Cena, you know, Superman versus Superman kind of gimmick, would have been fun. It would have been fun for everybody involved. It would have been great for Cena, who had never wrestled Goldberg before. It would have been great for Goldberg. He could pass the torch to another babyface. You know, it would have been great. You know, that would have been amazing. But I guess people didn't think about it that, you know, from that perspective. And also, it's always better for a guy going out to put the torch to somebody else. But I would have liked for Cena and Goldberg to be able to get one in. Not that I wanted to see John Cena get dropped on his head, but, you know, it'd have been great for the marquee, you know, for his final match to be against John Cena. That'd have been great. Oh, I could have just, man, think about the money they could have made with that. The next question is, why does TKO not understand the importance of house shows and families to WWE business? Well, they're thinking about maximizing dollars. That's really all they care about. They care about maximizing dollars. And house shows are a loss leader, even though the talent use it to get better. And, you know, a lot of talent learn things like locker room etiquette at house shows. They don't care about that stuff. You know, the families thing is that they're just greedy. You know, I hate using that word because I think that it doesn't really help matters, but I think they are just kind of greedy. Next, are you a Pulp fan? I'm getting into them like The Shadow, Doc Savage, John Carter of Mars, etc. Great stuff. John Carter, the first 2 books of John Carter are tremendous. I quit on the 3rd book, but I love the first 2. The Princess of Mars and Warlord of Mars, I think it's called. I love the first 2. I have a Shadow magazine. It's okay. It's pretty good. I like that. The Doc Savage comics are pretty solid. There's some, like the Spider, I haven't really jumped into it. But some of it is pretty good, man. When it comes to the pulps, it depends a lot on whether you're reading them or whether you're reading the comic books or whether you're reading a novel. For instance, a Shadow comic book is a lot more entertaining to me than a Shadow novel. And then you have stuff like the Maltese Falcon, which I think is pretty good too. Was it Raymond? Is it Raymond Chandler? You know, some of those old pulp novels, those dime novels, they're pretty good too. He says, I'm from South Africa. I've been watching since 2020. Appreciate the content, especially since I haven't really watched a lot of wrestling over the late 2000s. So your reviews definitely keep me up to date. I only show up for something big. I appreciate that. God bless South Africa. 305 Johnny says, what is your worst moments of 2025? Oh my goodness. Worst moments of 2025? Woo. A lot of that stuff that involves the Death Riders. It's pretty bad. But anytime Wheeler Yuta touched a microphone was pretty bad. No, I'm just gonna think about high profile stuff because I know it's easy to me to pick on people and things that I don't really like. But I think Jey Uso, his push as a world champion was not very good. The fact that he won the Royal Rumble, I just can't believe it felt like Sheamus to me. Like when Sheamus won that time, I was like, yeah, Vince really likes Sheamus. I don't know why. And even though I found out later that, obviously we found out later that it was supposed to be Chris Jericho, but he willingly gave it to Sheamus. It says to me that, maybe John Cena was willing to give it to Jey Uso. And this is one of those times where you have to say, nah, man, we got a plan. We got to do this. But that set the year off on a bad note because when Cena lost the Royal Rumble, we need to get him to WrestleMania somehow. So there's that. So that was number one. The Death Riders is number two. Pretty much anything that involved the Death Riders, I was uninterested in. Incredibly uninterested. A lot of the Edge and Christian stuff. Edge walking out on Dynamite. I mean, he just walked out and just left and didn't come back. He took off like the stuff with FTR. I mean, the match and everything was fine, but this whole I'm leaving because it's getting too dangerous, and he just left. Like, that's so weird for a babyface to just quit and walk out and be done. Like, that's so odd. Top Dog, he got some questions in. He says, what is your favorite late 80s, early 90s rap songs, essentially the pre-92 G-Funk era? Ooh. Oh, this is good. White Lines, which is, I think it's Grandmaster Flash and the Furious Five, which is, they made a song called White Lines. Supersonic, which I believe came out in the 80s. I don't want to say Africa Bambaataa because we know he's a pedo, so I'm going to try not to say anything like that. Around the Way Girl from LL Cool J. I'm Bad by LL Cool J. I don't know when You're a Customer by EPMD came out. I think it was 90, I think. But I'm not really a big fan of EPMD. But I do like Headbanger, and I do like You're a Customer. Two tremendous records from EPMD. Some Run DMC. Obviously, not none of the singles. But, well, I'm not going to say none of the singles because Down with the King was pretty good. But I think that came out in 93. But It's Tricky. Obviously, Hard Time. Run DMC is tremendous. What else? You said before 92. Ooh. NWA. Boys in the Hood. That's one of my favorite rap songs of all time right there is Boys in the Hood. I think it's a classic personally. I think it's probably one of the best rap songs of the 80s. If not the best rap song of the 80s. 6 in the Morning came out in like 87. That's Ice-T. So that was also before G-Funk. Schoolie D, PSK. There's a one called song, I think it's Coqui 900. Oh man, that's a tremendous record. Then you got Fat Gold Chain, that's also from Schoolie D. Man, there's then you got what's that? You got what's that group? Shit, right on the tip of my tongue. Audio 2. Damn, it was sampled by 50 Cent to make I Get Money. But I forget what the name of the song is. The actual song is dope, but it's by the group called Audio 2. Um, I like that record as well. There's just so many pre 92 records that is very fucking good. Oh man, I got kind of stumped though because I can't. I'm trying to remember names, and then it's a lot of Houdini. You know, the freaks come out at night. The freaks come out at night. I'm a hoe. You know I'm a hoe. I like Houdini. Next is, do you think people give too much blame to HBK for failing to draw against the NWO in 1996? Yes. Part of that was stale creative. The fact that the NWO was doing something edgy while WWE was doing their normal superhero stuff. A lot of that also was the fact that pretty much everybody that was there for him to wrestle was people who had been there for a while already, and they didn't really strongly book any of the heels. Obviously, they botched the Vader thing that they had been building up to, and that was one of those times where you wish WWE had stuck to their guns and actually went with Vader. But Sid was a nice pivot, but they didn't stick to their guns with Vader. But I don't think Vader would have been able to turn it around either, to be honest. But yeah, it's partly Shawn, because Shawn was small, and you know it was always harder to get people into the smaller guys. But also, you know, they were doing edgy stuff in the NWO, and WWE wasn't. It took for them to change that tone in order for the company to get better. Mr. VXG, what would you do with Trick Williams on the main roster? That's a good question. I think Trick Williams is a very solid mid-carder that you can bring up to the main event every once in a while. I think you do vignettes to get him started, and the vignettes are just him talking. Let him drop some of his Trick Williams gems on people with a montage of him working out and winning championships and being a big deal. And then you debut him, have him beat a couple of people, and maybe you work him towards either that US belt or that Intercontinental belt. He gets a hold of that, and then he's got that for a little bit. And I think with his age, you want to try to get him to the main event if he gets there quicker than not. But I would certainly try to work him towards the main event pretty quickly. I'm thinking maybe like a lot like Carlito without that long stretch of doing nothing. You know, like a lot like Carlito, but without that stretch of doing nothing. Mr. VXG says, do you have any favorite Christmas hip hop songs? I like to listen to Christmas on Death Row from time to time. You know, I really don't have any major Christmas songs that I like that are rap songs. I'm not really a big fan of those. M Studios, he's got 7 questions. 1, what are the biggest examples of revisionist history of wrestling that you hate the most? I know somebody wanted me to say pick WWE stuff where they revise history. You know, the smoky arenas. You know, that was pretty funny. Like WWE doing that kind of stuff is humorous because it pisses people off, even though it's not true. I think that TNA is the reason why you have a women's evolution. It's some really horseshit. For starters, the beautiful people were just as naked and sexual as any diva. They were just in longer matches. Secondly, Vince McMahon was the only one that really put women's wrestling on the map in the 80s. Yes, other wrestling promoters had women's matches. The AWA had a women's division, but they weren't putting the women as being somewhat equal to the men. Remember, Vince McMahon's lead angle going into WrestleMania outside of Hogan and Piper was Cyndi Lauper, Wendy Richter, and the Fabulous Moolah. There are magazines that would feature Hulk Hogan and Whitney Richter on the cover. But they would have you believe that because Vince didn't think that fucking Aja Kong should be in the main event of WrestleMania 10 or something like that, that Vince didn't care about women's wrestling. Again, Vince made a woman the Intercontinental Champion before TNA was even founded. Remember, TNA's founder was forced to do a job to a woman. So Vince was very progressive, in how he portrayed women. It didn't always stick. It was always a mixture of sex and uh, athleticism, but it was that like that with the men too. Sable, if she would have actually put some effort into wrestling, could have been considered a bigger star. I think Trish Stratus ended up taking the blueprint that Sable laid down in terms of being a bombshell, but she mixed it with a desire to actually want to wrestle, and that actually what took her to the next level. That's why people actually respected Trish Stratus. But the idea that a lot of these models weren't getting to work for 15 minutes on TV is like, who gives a shit? And yes, we do realize that there was a lot of people who didn't take it seriously backstage. Your Bruce Pritchards and your Kevin Dunns and all of them. They didn't care about women. We get that. But ultimately, it was Vince who was trying this thing in the 80s. He tried it again in the 90s. And he tried it again in 2000s. It didn't stick until like 2012, 2013, 14, etc. That's when it stuck. And everybody's like, oh, we pushed the old man into doing it. It's like, yeah, right. He was already doing it. Second, in your opinion, what makes someone a good promo mic worker? Being smooth, really getting your character over in your verbal work. Having something that the audience can look forward to in terms of promo, being able to do a wide range of emotions, being realistic, being able to touch the heart, or being able to make people laugh. Because you can make people laugh by being a bad promo, like Wheeler Yuta. You can also disgust people by being a bad promo, like Wheeler Yuta. But if you can do like a wide range of things, I think like one of the best mic workers of all time is Mick Foley, because he can give you the sad mankind story. He can always give you the funny mankind story, and he can give you the scary mankind story, and he could do it all. It's like, that's something that when I'm looking at people on the mic, that's what I'm looking for. Like, a lot of people can shit talk, the Trick Williams and the LA Knights, and a lot of people can do stand-up comedy like The Rock and some of these other guys. But to be able to do a little bit of everything, that's real talent. 3, do you think Triple H sold out to TKO? The reason why I say that is because these shows since WrestleMania 40 feels like he's been on autopilot. Like, if I missed 6 months of TV, I really didn't miss anything. I think this is what TKO wants, and it's also what Triple H wants. Triple H is just there, I think, because they needed a wrestling person to run the company after Vince fucked it up. And Triple H was a natural move into that position. And I do believe that they want Triple H to be the Dana White of WWE. I truly believe that. I had to take a drink of water. Getting dry mouth. 4, do you think John Cena is the GOAT in WWE history? If not, who is and why? Hulk Hogan is. And it's obvious why he is. There wouldn't be a John Cena without Hulk Hogan. 5, do you think having 2 Rumbles, Chambers, Money in the Bank matches in one pay-per-view has negatively affected these match concepts? If so, what would you do to fix it if you were in charge? Well, yes. I think that the Money in the Bank especially becomes very forgettable when there's more than one on the show. The same thing has happened to Elimination Chambers and kind of with Royal Rumbles as well. I think the 2-night format for the pay-per-views could really help, because now you're not sitting through 2 of the same match on the same show. That could help, because once you cross the Rubicon and now you're in this position, you can't undo it. You can't go back and say we're not doing Rumbles for women anymore. We're going to alternate who gets to do the Rumble. Like, we can't do that now. We got to have them both. We got to have men and women's war games. But that don't mean we got to have them on the same night. So I think they probably could be used better, but we can't go back to, 1, which is unfortunate. 6, do you need to be a long-reigning title holder to be considered a good champion in wrestling? What makes an effective champion to you? If you elevate the title, if you could take a title that nobody cares about and elevate it, or you could take a belt and make it matter, then you're an effective champion. I think that somebody can take a championship, and if they're booked correctly or if they have a plan for that title, you can make that title the most important belt on the show. I think John Cena did that with the United States Championship, even though he wasn't the world champion. He was having the best match on the show, and he was given opportunities, and he had a great storyline that was moving things forward, and it really elevated that title. That's the best usage of it. I think that the Bar did a great job with the tag team championships when they were a tag team. I think they did a really good job. I think the Usos and the New Day did a really great job with the tag team titles as well. I think that the X Division championship was really the marquee title when a guy like AJ Styles had it in TNA, and Samoa Joe as well. I think that sometimes, not just that you win a lot and lose a lot, but that your storyline is effective. You come across as a guy who really is a champion and not just a guy holding a belt. I think that is what makes championships matter. 7. Any John Cena matches or moments that you loved and hated in his career? Many. I really loved his matches with Umaga. I thought those were great. I liked his matches with Bray Wyatt, and I liked his matches with Rusev as well. I think Cena worked better with bigger guys who were heels and could impose their physical will, and he could fight from underneath because he can make the crowd actually sympathize with him. And then obviously he had great matches with Danielson, and he had some pretty good ones with Randy Orton. He had some great ones with AJ Styles and great ones with CM Punk. I mean, we can go all day with that. Black Knight. I've never seen this one name before, so I appreciate it. How you doing? When do you think the Saudis are going to buy the company? When TKO makes their money back. Once TKO gets all the money back that they're going to make off of this deal, they're probably going to sell it to Qatar or some shit. If we're being honest, I'm not even surprised that they would do something like that. 305 Johnny has 2 questions. Did you get a chance to listen to any legendary albums from hip hop recently? I haven't listened to a whole album in ages. A whole old album. Usually, back when I had a computer, I would sit down and listen to rap albums, like the entire album, while I read comic books or watch wrestling or something. But now I listen to a song here and there. You said like the new Mobb Deep, De La Soul, Ghostface, or Raekwon. I did listen to the new Ghostface album. I haven't heard the new Mobb Deep. And I'm not really a big fan of De La Soul, so I haven't really gone back and listened to them either. Arcadia Jaha is back. He's got more questions. He says, I'm a big fan of JC Jane since the Toxic Attraction days. I find her to be the most well-rounded and balanced NXT female wrestler in terms of promo, character work, presence, and in-ring ability. Do you share the same opinion? If so, why do you think she still has so many haters despite her successful year? I think part of it is because she hasn't been presented as being the top from the beginning. And part of a lot of why people act the way that they do towards certain wrestlers and when they get a push is because they were introduced to this wrestler a certain way, and so that's their perception. Like the people who still think of Cody Rhodes like Stardust, or think of Drew McIntyre like he was in the 3-man band. You know, some people never get over that kind of thing, and especially if you don't like that person, you never really get over it. And so you have a situation where JC Jane has been presented as an underling to GGE and Mandy and all of them. So seeing her as being the top woman is kind of like, what? I can't see it. But she's grown so much. I actually agree. She is one of the more balanced ones in terms of having everything. But she's also been there forever. So she's had a lot to learn. So I agree with you. She's tremendous. Tranquility V. I've never seen this name before. Welcome to the team, brother. Do you believe a lot of what wrestling fans expect in today's wrestling is fair, or is it our needs for a better product due to the bar being set so high during our nostalgic eras? I truly believe that nostalgia is a big part of it. I do think that, especially for me, like I'm always very nostalgic for the shows that I loved when I was a kid. But I also am objective, and I look back and say, yeah, we don't need T.O. Hopper and Duke the Dumpster Drosy, but there was a magic to the way things were done in the 90s and the 2000s, early 2000s, that are not being done in recent years. There is a magic to the 2010s era that is lost today. And I think it's honest to say that it is both nostalgia and the fact that fan desires have increased and that we would like to go back to being that comfortable era. But that time is gone. You know, all of the favorite stars are older. Most of my heroes from the triune, the holy trinity of WWE for me is dead. I grew up on Hogan, Savage, and Warrior. All of them are dead. That's why I was so hurt when Hulk Hogan passed, because he was the last one left. Out of all of the heroes I grew up watching when I was a little boy, Hulk Hogan was the last one left. I didn't grow up watching Ric Flair, or Ricky Steamboat. I learned to like those guys later, but I grew up on Hogan, Savage, and Warrior, and now all of them are gone. And that's when I really started to feel old, and you realize those days ain't coming back. So it's hard for me to go back and watch wrestling now sometimes too, because, you watch the Legion of Doom. I was a big fan of them guys, the Road Warriors, and they're gone. You're never going to get guys like that again. That entire era, Jake Snake Roberts, and, even guys like the Barbarian, like you're never going to get guys like that again. And I just kind of have to accept it. All right. We're coming down to the wire. This is Jaden Young. He says, I've never seen this name before, so I appreciate you stopping by, brother. He says, am I the only one that finds the late 90s and early 2000s overrated? No, I think so too. I quit watching wrestling around that time. A lot of it had to do with the direction they were going in. I kind of lost interest. But if you're talking about wrestling, no. That was actually my teenage years. That's when I started getting more into wrestling. I mean, not wrestling, but rap and other things, video games and stuff. So, not really, no. But it was prime American culture. If you could stay in 99, 2000 forever, there wouldn't be any cancel culture and, all that kind of stuff. So, but in terms of wrestling, yeah. He says, it's better than what came after, but I feel like it pales in comparison to the 90s and 80s. Oh, he's talking about culture. He says, it seems culture got homogenized around that time. What are things you can't stand about the Attitude Era? How was Cena able to become a crossover star in the 2000s and early 2010s, despite a portion of the crowd hating him? It seems that he's asking a cultural question, but it's broken up like in several different questions. All right. So a lot of culture did homogenize in the 2000s because of the internet. So things stopped being local anymore. And this became very, very, very obvious when it comes to rap music. Because rap music through the 80s and the early part of the 90s and the mid part of the 90s was incredibly regional. And nobody sounded the same. And then around 2000, 2001, 2, 3, you started getting less of a regional sound. And you started seeing a lot of people pick up regional dialects that are outside of, their region. You started seeing, guys pick up the hot girl and hootie hoo and all that kind of stuff in New York. You're like, what? They don't hootie hoo in New York. And you start seeing Bloods and Crips in places that you didn't normally see Bloods and Crips. So you started seeing a lot of culture homogenize because of the internet and because of TV and a lot of that stuff. So that didn't help matters at all. But to switch fares to the Attitude Era, one of the things I didn't really like about the Attitude Era is sometimes I do like wrestling matches, and matches were very, very unimportant in the Attitude Era. they would have a pay-per-view with a match with no conclusion. You know, like the match was just technically the bell still has not rung on some of these matches in the Attitude Era. I believe was it Survivor Series 2000 where I don't think Austin and Triple H even, or was it Austin and Rikishi? It was one of them where I don't think the match technically ended. It's just like Austin tried to murder the guy and that was it. It was like, wow, like that's the end of the show. It was like it was a pretty big end to the show because the car got flipped over or something like that. But I was like, holy shit. The match didn't really end, you know. So, and there was a lot of the Superman stuff in the Attitude Era I wasn't a big fan of, despite the fact that people talk about how realistic it was. I'll never go back and watch Undertaker and Kane versus Stone Cold Steve Austin. As much as I love the Kane Undertaker matches, the Kane Steve Austin matches were not as fun. I can say that much. How was Cena able to become a crossover star? Well, a lot of it had to do with him being seen as sort of a Eminem parody. And I think a lot of that was the cultural element of white rappers being very popular for a spell there. You know, Eminem, of course, being one of them. And then Mac Miller a couple of years later. But John Cena was already a top guy when Mac Miller became sort of an important rapper for white folks. But a lot of that had to do with it, his ability to freestyle and, you know, get people's attention doing that. And then they actually leaned into the culture by having him do a rap album. And then he was doing features with people like Murs, even though Murs is a weirdo. He's a real weirdo, too. Like, when Murs went on, what was that, Hip Hop DX, and was like, my favorite rapper sucks a dick. I'm like, man, get this shit out of here. Like, I deleted everything that nigga made off of my... I was like, I'm done with you. So he's a real weirdo. But, you know, he gave some credibility to John Cena, especially in, like, the black community and stuff. But I think a large part of it was that Cena was there at an interesting time. A lot of it was on national TV when he was doing a lot of this stuff. He was on UPN. You know, at the same time Eddie Guerrero was becoming a cultural icon, John Cena's on TV rapping as a white boy. You know, getting pops and being edgy. So I think that really helped a lot, a whole lot, to be quite honest. Very appreciable too. All right, we're getting near the end here. I think we got one more set of questions. Top Dog says, what's your thoughts on people saying Bruno wasn't a draw? I think that if they say some stuff like that, that's one of those things that's obviously they trolling. Nobody in their right mind thinks that Bruno Sammartino wasn't a draw. I don't think anybody who knows anything about wrestling can sit down and say that. So Degenerate Sharingan, he has 6 questions. He says, 1, who is to blame for the Doomsday Device botch? I'm hearing Punk, Cody, and I'm even hearing Braun is a little of all. Well, when it came to that spot, part of the reason why it didn't go so well is because Cody didn't go down. You know, when you do the Doomsday Device, the clothesline is supposed to be the guide to the fallback. But Cody didn't fall back because sometimes when people do the Doomsday Device, they want the guy to flip off their shoulders. And I think that's where they were going for, is that Brian Breaker was supposed to flip off of Cody's shoulders. But they should have just did the safe one and he falls back. But they didn't. They decided he was going to clothesline him off of Cody's shoulders. And he landed on his goddamn head. So I'm going to go with it being... I'm going to go with the producer's fault. Because whoever told them that they were going to do that spot that way was a mistake. They should have did it the safe way. It wouldn't have been as great a spot, but he probably wouldn't have broken his neck either, which would have been great. Second question: left or right or center? How can you tell that you're being politically radicalized? I think a large part of that has to do with you starting to think and say things that you wouldn't normally think or say. And I think a good way to do that is to to stay level is to, especially if you're on social media, look at things that you have said before and how do you think about that now. For instance, sometimes I look at some old tweets of mine, not just to stay consistent, but just to see where I was on this issue. For instance, I look back on tweets of like Candace Owens or Nick Fuentes from like a couple of years ago, just to see where I was on them at the time. You know, not to, well, I have to say this now because things change, you know? And my thoughts on Nick Fuentes 4 years ago have changed a little bit, you know, not necessarily for the better, but they've changed. And my thoughts on Candace Owens hasn't changed that much for the better, but they've changed. And sometimes you end up on the same side of these people on an issue, but only for an issue or two or three or whatever. But people who have turned their entire personalities, most of the time, they have never gone back and looked at what they've said before and what they've thought about before and what could possibly have changed them. And it makes sense for a lot of people if you go back sometimes and look at some of your old tweets, or if you're a blogger, look at some of your old blogs. If you're a YouTube content creator, look at some of your old videos and see where you were at the time. You know, what was you thinking about? And then try to pinpoint this part where you diverged into something else. And it's easy to see with other people. Like it was like for some people who have been watching Tim Pool for a long time, you can see where Tim was like this liberal guy and then he veered off into being right wing. But even though he's not that right wing, but he kind of veered off into that. If you've been watching Amazing Lucas for a long time, you remember when he was a conservative and now all of a sudden he's a crazy liberal, you know, crazy race collectivist. And you saw that, but maybe he doesn't see it. Or maybe he will be able to say, this is when I was thinking this way before I read this book or before this situation happened and this radicalized me. And that happens. And for a lot of young people, they have these triggering moments where they could not have imagined thinking this 5 or 6 years ago. But then this happened and now they think this way. And I think the assassination of Charlie Kirk has done that to a lot of people. It has radicalized a lot of people. Some people were radicalized before that, but a lot of people are starting really to splinter after what happened to Charlie Kirk because a lot of people want revenge. They want to be able to laugh at the left for losing somebody, but that makes you heartless. You know, it means you want somebody on the left to get shot and killed, but you don't really want that. You know, there's people out there who are heartbroken, who are very upset. And there's people who are, and I think this is for a lot of people, is that they've been disheartened. That they've seen that all it takes is one guy with one bullet, and you can kill somebody, and that's pretty much the end. But what happens is, with the Charlie Kirk thing, is the same thing that happened when Martin Luther King got shot. And that is, there's radicals that have appeared who have said enough is enough of this shit. And these are the Fuentes types, just like it was the Black Panthers or whatever, went for the black community, where talking and playing the game, it just won't work. So now we're going to have to be radical. And then there's going to be the copycats, you know, your Jesse Jacksons and all of them. So now you got people copycatting Charlie Kirk. They want to go around the country and take up his mantle and do what he was doing and all this bullshit. And you have to make sure that you have a proper response to triggering events. Then you could tell you've been radicalized if you go back and look at what you believed before and see if you still believe that now. The reasoning that you were using before, do you still use that level of reasoning? And I fight getting radicalized all the time, you know, like because the comment sections and the videos and the algorithms, that stuff will radicalize you very easily. For instance, one of the funnier things that happened, and it happened to me, is when I watched the AAA show in Spanish, I started getting commercials in Spanish, and I started getting suggested a bunch of other Mexican wrestling shows because your algorithm leans into that. So when I started watching like Christian YouTubers, I started getting a whole lot of Christian stuff dumped into my algorithm, and that kept me from getting radicalized. So it really helps. I'm not saying that religion itself pulls me away from it, but the internet can steer you, and you have to be able to be like, okay, I don't really need all of this stuff, but it's great that, you know, if I'm aware that YouTube is aware that, hey, you like watching comic books reviews on YouTube, so we're going to suggest 100,000 comic book YouTube channels. Okay, great. That's great for comic book YouTube channels, but if I'm interested in, I don't know, fascism, do I really need 1,000 channels of fascism dumping into my lap? But I'm aware of that. And some people aren't. A lot of young people aren't. You know, that your ideas might be getting shaped by the algorithm or by whatever popular influencer popped up. So you need to stay centered. It's okay to change. It's okay to even get radical if you feel like it's obviously the right thing to do. But I think the easiest way is to, if you keep a journal or if you're a blogger or something like that, reread what you've put out to see if you're consistent and staying to yourself. 3, sweet potato pie or pumpkin pie. What team are you on? I don't believe people should eat pumpkins. I'm not on team eating pumpkin. I've never eaten a pumpkin in my life. I'm going to continue not eating pumpkins. 4, when it comes to Thanksgiving and fall, what come to mind? Well, I'm from Michigan, so I started thinking about the apple orchard and apple cider and donuts. You know, I think every child has ever been born in Michigan has had those field trips to the apple orchards where you get apple pie, you get warm apple cider, or sometimes cold apple cider, and plain donuts. And that's quintessential Michigan. I think of Halloween, you know, you think of the trees changing color, you know, like there's a lot of cultural stuff there for the fall when it comes to Michigan. So that's what I think of mostly when it comes to Thanksgiving and this time of the year. 5, he says, I don't know if it's me, but why does the left dislike fence sitters and centrists more than the right does Jesus Christ? Someone really do believe that both sides are full of ish and don't want to be heavily caught up in the BS. Well, I could tell you this. A lot of the left, the way that they look at things is either you're on their side or you are an enemy. And what they want to do is they want to culture jam. And what that means is they want to create a situation where you're forced to make a choice. And there is a lot of issues for which there is no middle, right? Like, even if you want to say, look, I can see both sides of an abortion debate. You know, they will be so extreme that they force you to make a decision. Like, you could say, like, most people are in the middle of abortion. Even somebody who might be a Christian, you know, even a devout Christian, might understand why an abortion makes sense. If you have an affair, or, you know, if it's an underage girl and she had sex for the first time, she wasn't thinking about it. You don't want the 17-year-old girl to have a baby. But then they'll start saying, we want abortion on demand up to the 9th month. It kind of forces you to make a decision at that point, right? Like when they talk about prison reform, that you say, okay, it makes sense that we don't want to lock up a bunch of people for petty crimes. But then they go to the extreme and they start saying, virtually, we don't want to put anybody in jail for anything. So they kind of force you to make that decision. And they do it by being extremists. And they kind of obliterate the center. And so when you say you're in the center, what you're saying is you're not on our team. So we have to create a situation where either You're an enemy or you're a friend. And I believe I read in this book where MLK once said to people, if you question our tactics, you were never our friend. And the left always says that they believe in a diversity of tactics. And what that means is that however or whatever they need to do to get what they want, you need to be okay with that. And most people aren't, but you often see that people whose status, is required or tied up in being on the left, they will go with it. This is how you get people who are, pro welfare forever with no restrictions. It's like, that's not even reasonable. No, every reasonable person that you will talk to about something like welfare, they don't think you should be on welfare for 30 years. They don't think you should be living in a project your entire life and be able to leave that project to your kid like an inheritance. Most people don't think illegal immigrants should be, getting Medicare and all that kind of stuff. But if you create a scenario where you force it, or if you can manipulate people, then you manipulate them. You just say, "Oh, these poor illegal immigrants, we destroyed their lands, so they get to come here and take up all of our stuff." But for the most part, they want to obliterate the center. You have to be okay with the things that they're doing, and the right is doing it too. This with the Nick Fuentes and all this kind of stuff. You have to be okay with Nick Fuentes being a Holocaust denier and being a racist and talking about and all the gay stuff that he does and says, because that's part of pleb filtering. They don't want nobody but the most devout following him. So he's going to run off everybody else. And the left does the same thing. And to be quite honest, it won't be long before Nick Fuentes is a Democrat anyway. 6, is hip hop really dying down in the mainstream? I believe it is. And the reason I believe it is because they're going to take everything out of it. They pretty much have taken everything out of hip hop except the artists. A lot of these artists are not really all that important anymore. And so it's all just what the industry can put together. When it comes to hip hop, they're not going out and recruiting artists and training them and making them better and all that kind of stuff anymore. They're looking at it as if they can put anybody in the booth to say anything over a beat, and that's it. And that's what they're doing. This is Ice Spice. At no point in time in life would she have ever gotten a record deal. But now she can get one because they know that they can sell her to companies as a brand ambassador. Who cares if she can't rap? She's on a 360 contract, which means they get a piece of everything she does. All she got to do is be thick, and people will pay to see her, and that's it. She'll get money to do commercials and a bunch of other stuff, and she can't write a lick. She can't rap a lick, and it don't matter. So ultimately, that's that. All right, y'all. I appreciate it, man. I appreciate everybody for participating. I don't have a lot of time left. I think I have a 90-minute limit on this. I appreciate you guys. Be blessed. Thank you for your questions. Till next time.